It's funny. It's a big one, but also I don't think it's going to friggin' matter because every time it seems like once a month we're talking about the latest snabs or the latest group getting busted or the latest exit scam, and then there's just another one. The next month we're talking about
Yeah.
some Scottish guy versus some Russian guy, and at the end of the day, is this going to have any impact? Right? The Hydra head gets cut off, as you say.
Crime hasn't been solved in other fields, so why should we be special?
Quote of the day right there, folks. Quote of the day. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the CyberY Pod, where security, technology, and business meet. TCW is your go-to auditory and visual feast summarizing the captivating world of cybersecurity. On the pod, we bring you a monthly roundtable where humor meets hacker culture. We delve into the latest in cybersecurity news, trends, and mishaps, offering up a unique flavor of commentary for your consumption. Whether you're a seasoned InfoSec professional, a budding hacker, or just a tech enthusiast hungry for knowledge, strap in for a ride through the cyber wilderness and welcome to the CyberY Podcast. So, opening up podcast episode number 4, I'm going to introduce you to the TCW team. Joining me today at the distributed CyberY studios are 3 of my absolutely most wonderful partners in crime. First, we have the amazing Rick Holland. Let me welcome to this month's show my main man, my co-host, great Rick Holland. He's as good as they come at understanding motivations and tactics of nation states, cyber criminals, and threat hunters. He's the sizzler of sirloin, the bearer of burnt ends, the regent of Wagyu, and the best girl dad outside of yours truly. Please welcome Rick Holland. Hello, Rick.
I don't think you need to rewrite them. I think that one's good. I like that.
You think that one's good? All right.
Yeah, I like it.
The regent of Wagyu, the bearer of burnt ends. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Adrian Sanabria. He's the resident tech wizard for the CyberY. He understands and deep dives all things bits, bytes, and blinking lights. He makes sure the TCW team goes as deep as we do wide. He's the and grumpy old man, the 2020 reincarnation of Vidal Sassoon, and the Jason to my Momoa. Let's welcome Adrian Sanabria to the show.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, no need to change it. I agree with Rick.
All right, 2 for 2. Let's see what Katie thinks of hers, because I'm not sure she remembers last month either, but Katie is the CyberWise marketing savant. I changed it. You're no longer a strategy savant. You're a marketing savant this month. She navigates the complex web of cybersecurity vendor marketing policies, practices, and human impacts. Only outpaced by Adrian, Katie's hair is the 2020s version of Nicole Kidman. She's the brains behind the CyberY brawn. And of course, she's the most well-spoken of the bunch. Please welcome our ray of sunshine in an otherwise dark studio, KT.
Well, I had to do that since you said I'm the most well-spoken, right? So I had to come up with something really stupid.
Well played, and I'm your show moderator extraordinaire, Tyler Shields, the host with the most, the driver of this bus full of freaks and weirdos, and the founder of the CyberY. With that, let's get this show going. So before we get into the meat of this month's show, I'd like to thank Material Security for being the official sponsor of the CyberY Pod. This month, secure email from every angle. There's more than one way in when exploiting email as an attack vector, plus even more to target once you're inside the mailbox. Material Security takes a holistic approach to email security that covers the entire threat landscape, stopping new flavors of phishing and pretexting attacks in their tracks. Material protects accounts and data from exploitation and exposure. Visit material.security to learn more about their multi-layered detection and response toolkit for email. Thank you to Anna and the team at Material Security. Big shout out to you guys. So let's get into the meat. I want to open with a really hot take, a really hot topic that we've been looking at this week, actually last week and a half, maybe even a couple weeks now, the Snowflake situation. Rick, this one's in your wheelhouse. You've got the cover for us. You've got the content for us on this one. The nutshell, the TLDR is Snowflake. Was Snowflake attacked or was Snowflake not attacked? Where do we divide the responsibilities matrix when we're putting our data into a system like
matrix.
Snowflake, into the matrix. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on what happened with the Snowflake attack over the last couple of weeks, maybe either from a timeline perspective or from a threat actor perspective, however you want to get us up to date.
It's interesting timing for me because I'd been out, just got back from a 3-week European trip, 2 weeks of which I was on PTO. So a lot of this dropped and more news came out while I was out there. But essentially, Snowflake customers were compromised through info stealers. And we've talked about info stealers on the podcast. We've written about info stealers in the past. It's a very common attack technique. We mentioned email and our sponsor. Hi, Anna. At the top, info stealers, also another really significant intrusion method. But essentially, some really big brands, came out in this. Ticketmaster, allegedly 560 million people. That was the first one in late May, actually, while I was out, that ended up on one of the English language forums that was being sold. Then we saw Santander, financial services company, come out. We saw Advanced Auto Parts also come out. I think the list of customers was just over. Yep, Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster Live Nation kind of combo, right? But I think there was 116. I think that's the number of potential customers that were compromised. Of course, they have.
I actually have seen it up to 165 customers out of 9,800 Snowflake customers. Roughly 165 customers have been breached.
That definitely doesn't make, you could say, hey, it could be way worse. It definitely doesn't make the 165 potential customers feel any better that the scale and the blast radius was much smaller. Mandiant actually came out and did a blog on the intrusion, or basically Mandiant was working the intrusions for a number of the victims that were compromised here. But at the heart of it, it was password reuse is what's getting us here. Now, interestingly enough, just this week, some new news came out. So Kim Zetter, one of our, one of the top journalists in our space, I'm sure no doubt everyone knows, Wired Magazine on Monday just released an article where they interviewed the threat actors involved, shiny hunters. And actually, I've had experience through my days when I was at a cyber threat intelligence provider of being familiar with shiny hunters and still familiar with them. When this stuff was first coming out and it was, known to be shiny hunters, if we did assessments on shiny hunters, we'd say typically it's something like, with high confidence, what they say is true. They are not typically one that makes things up. Shiny hunters also, they've been around since 2021, I think. They're kind of seen as Robin Hood figures on the forums. They would give dumps and databases away for free. So they have quite a popular following out there. And basically, Kim was able to do a text interview with them, and then she published that in Wired Magazine on Monday.
That's incredible. So what was, did you get the chance to read through that article in detail?
Yeah.
Were there any interesting storylines that came out of that interview with shiny hunters, or is it just kind of same old?
Well, it's some of the same themes that we talk about in cybersecurity: third-party risk, password reuse, that sort of stuff. But what came out, as far as I know, is new is Shiny Hunters was saying that they gained access to at least some of the victims through a partner. So it's really fourth-party risk that we're talking about here. So a company called EPAM Systems, which is a publicly traded software and engineering firm. I've got staff in the Ukraine, background in Belarus. Was used. The hacker says they found data on an EPAM employee system through this type of attack, right? Credential reuse, and then used that to get access to Snowflake accounts, and then pivoted from there. Mandiant didn't bring this up. Mandiant said third parties. So it's highly likely that it could be, both, if shiny hunters believe to be true, them, as well as just being able to go out to a forum and buy or rush a market and find, accounts for shiny hunters here. Of course, EPAM said, let's see if I can find the quote on it. I don't have it right up in front of me, but they said they weren't aware of it and they're investigating it. And investigations take time, so we'll have to see what comes out publicly.
So obviously this was brand impacting for Snowflake, right? Everybody immediately, the story broke that Snowflake was breached. right? That was the original breaking of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, was Snowflake even breached in this scenario at all? Or was this an issue with shared responsibility? As I've discussed before, when moving to the cloud, who owns the issue for properly configuring the state of that security environment? And I know and Adrian's giving me the look, give me the eyeballs. He's got something to say here. Um, there's the default secure state that these systems should be in. So I think that's part of the problem. But Adrian, give me a little bit of information about the infrastructure issues and where the responsibility for this breach lies. Was Snowflake even breached?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about shared responsibility, it's not that different from all the S3 buckets, that were open. We had so many breaches because somebody just left an S3 bucket open. Should Amazon have been monitoring that for its customers? I also remember Adalom making a name for themselves when they discovered that Salesforce customers were getting their entire instances just downloaded. And Salesforce wasn't really looking for it and not telling customers about it. And customers didn't have the observability or the logs to know that it was happening. And I think the way Adalom, being a CASB, found out was by redirecting all the logins, using a reverse proxy to do that. So yeah, it's a great question. It's if the CSP isn't monitoring this stuff, my service provider, my SaaS provider, and I'm not monitoring it, then yeah, sure, you're going to have a period of time when you can get away with stuff, when you can plunder those open S3 buckets, when you can cred stuff people's accounts, download all their data, be as noisy as you want, and nobody's noticing.
So go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say, and this is not an original take. I might have even read something Adrian wrote. I don't know, but it almost doesn't matter who was breached in this scenario as far as the noise goes, as far as the media goes, because Snowflake's going to get some blame for this. Just like if somebody leaves their S3 bucket open, if it's their misconfiguration, if it's their default settings that they haven't changed, it's still going to come back on the biggest brand name that people know, especially if we're talking about a fourth or an nth degree intrusion point, right? Because some people are just looking for somebody to blame at some point, and so Snowflake's going to get caught up in it, even if it is exactly the same shared responsibility model. We were talking about this, I know, on the other podcast about Microsoft. Like, somebody has to help people understand where the responsibilities. And maybe this is an old topic. Maybe we've been talking about it for a while, but there's so many settings on so many different tools and so many environments and so many different people using them now that it's just this massive web of complexity. And so whether or not Snowflake was breached, there's going to be some blowback on them at some point. I think within the security community, people will figure it out and it'll be fine. It's not like Snowflake is going to suffer tremendously, but their name is going to get tied up in it somehow.
So thinking back to the S3 buckets, because Adrian made that analogy, and rightfully so, when all those S3 buckets were consistently getting popped, right? When people were finally moving into the cloud. I don't remember going back thinking in my head going, oh, AWS keeps getting breached. I
Right,
never
yeah.
thought that. I always thought, oh, some dumbass left their S3 bucket open again, right? Left it unprotected, no password, misconfigured, unencrypted, whatever the state issues were. And that gave rise to the CSPM market as a broad market, right? To understand the state of security of your CSP. Is there maybe and God forbid, we talk about a DSPM market in the security of your data in the sense of the configuration state of your data storage systems? Set that commentary aside. I really don't want to go down yet another SPM discussion. But I don't remember thinking AWS was breached when S3 buckets were getting popped. But yet it's very much the same thing, because people compromised credentials using a third-party system or even a fourth-party breach, like Shiny Hunters has said that Rick rightfully quoted. None of this is a breach of Snowflake. It's just bad hygiene and non-default configuration secure state that Snowflake is providing.
I blamed Amazon back in the S3 bucket day for not enabling. Like, we need to let customers make easy choices. And Katie like nailed it with
Clear
complexity
choice.
and things along those lines. Now if I'm a CISO and I got popped because of this, I can't say, oh, default configuration for Snowflake, I'm responsible for it. So I think there's culpability on both sides. And Snowflake's CISO in the on the Medium blog that he keeps updating just said that they're working on a way to allow customers to force MFA as a default setting across the board. So there's some product gaps here for sure. But at the end of the day, I think the CISO, he or she that's responsible for a security team, is got to do something about this. And also about the credential stuffing problem as well. I mean, that's a whole nother, or not credential stuffing, that's a component of it, but password reuse and things along those lines. So
So I
There's
think
so many themes. There's so many themes, and I'll come to you in a second, Adrian. There's so many themes here. There's the supply chain security theme from the fourth party vendor that Shiny Hunters claims they compromised. There's a credential security issue here that determining should MFA be default on for these types of environments. There's attribution and scope problems. This is going to end up with exposure and ransomware issues on so much of this data over time. And then we even have the storyline of, is there any kind of regulatory compliance that could make this better or make it not happen again now that we've seen it repeated from AWS to Snowflake? If people move to some other data system in 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it is, are we going to see the same repeated pattern? Let's start for a second on the credential security side. I want to dig into that, and then I'll come back to you, Adrian. Would MFA have fixed this problem? Multi-factor authentication have fixed this problem for the majority of those compromised? And if so, is the offset that comes with that, the difficulty in onboarding, the friction of people trying to figure out how to use the stuff in the first place, the business aspects that Snowflake wants to keep super streamlined, where's that trade-off lie?
Do we know if any of the creds were API keys?
Have you heard, Rick? Any idea?
I don't know.
Because
Yeah, I'm
you
not
can't
sure either.
put MFA on an API key. I
And
mean, there are
and that's
other things you can do, but
that's one of the things I've been saying a lot lately is, now I agree, we need to have MFA on for sure, but adversaries are cat and mouse, right? Everyone on here knows that you put a new control in, adversaries seek ways to bypass it. So maybe, Tyler, you corrected me, the number was 165. Maybe they wouldn't have got 165 customers, but if you wanted to do a target attack against probably any global 2000 company, you can go out to Russia market, you can go out to the forums and look for those types of domains. There are so many different ways that you can bypass MFA as well. Like, threat actors are using social engineering to call into help desk, as we saw with MGM last year to get MSA disabled. They're stealing the session cookies that are used, and so MFA is not even necessary there. You're seeing, and a lot of people still use SMS based MFA, which is barely better than nothing, but it is still better than nothing. But SIM swapping is used, right? And if you're a T-Mobile customer, as an example, T-Mobile gets a lot of SIM swapping. So one thought I would have for everybody out here is just be careful of the saying MFA would have saved us. MFA will add friction to the threat actor, but it may not save you. It may reduce the blast radius for the Snowflake customers here. But definitely MFA is something that we need, but adversaries are looking actively at ways to bypass it.
Adrian, I cut you off before. Did you have something you wanted to add?
yeah, just saying that a lot of this is just the balance. Rick was just talking about the added friction. Increasing the baseline of security that you allow for your customers. And at what point do we feel like, because obviously Amazon's, well, I'm not sure if it's obvious to everybody, but they made a bunch of changes to how S3 buckets work, the defaults, stuff like that. They've made it a lot harder to make that mistake and a lot easier to detect it when it does happen. And with something like MFA, we've known MFA is important for a while, and maybe it is kind of that balancing of, yeah, we could require MFA for everyone, but still not going to help if OAuth keys get stolen. Still not going to help if API keys get stolen. There's all these keys that are intended to be used programmatically behind the scenes, not by a live person. I wonder if they just decided, yeah, it's not worth the extra friction in the the heat we're going to get from customers if we make it harder for them to log in.
Gotcha. Are we near the end of this thing? Is this a single news cycle thing, Rick, or is there going to be downstream data compromise stuff that ends up, are we going to see massive ransomware issues on the back of this? Are we going to see significant additional compromises over time based on the stolen data, which could include say, Ticketmaster's creds within their system, and then kind of see a rolling effect here? How much additional risk have we not encountered yet?
Well, one answer to your question, like the cynic in me is like, as far as news cycles go, next week there'll be something happen bigger in our space, and it doesn't take long before these things get buried under another piece. Now, I think to your point, right, there's potentially a lot of data that has been compromised. Could that data be used to compromise other victims? How many other Ticketmasters are out there? I do think there's a longer tail on this for Snowflake customers for sure. And hopefully at this point, customers have followed the guidance of the things that they can implement from a Snowflake perspective. And Adrian actually made a comment earlier about logs that I think is just such an important thing. It's like, whatever solution you're using, like, make sure you have logs, because the worst thing it can be is when something happens, you can't prove or disprove what has occurred. So I think there'll be a long tail on it. I think the news cycle will get hijacked by something else, in the next couple of weeks, unfortunately.
Well, and what's stopping
Yep.
it? What has changed if the root cause is stolen credentials? Like what's going to stop this thing from just continuing?
I mean, it's
MFA.
up to, it's up. Well, I've been kind of skeptical of the enterprise browsers and things along those lines, but it does make a case. Like, if you're listening to this and you're trying to, people sync their Chrome browsers from their work laptop to the personal. We've seen that in breaches for years now. That's nothing new. So there are some areas where putting friction on your customers, your employees, your peers can help reduce your attack surface. So you don't even have to have an enterprise browser. You can do stuff with Chrome in and of itself to protect yourself. But I do think these types of cases do make, the case to at least consider some of the enterprise browsers. Now, for the price of what they are relative to other controls I might want to implement, I don't know how that would prioritize out. Like, let me maximize what I can do. But at the end of the day, defenders need to be focused on how are we going to protect the credentials that we have out there, expiring session timeouts on cookies, making them really, really low, also creates friction for your employees. So it's a real big balancing act. Even, it's a balancing act with your vendors on shared responsibility. And it's a balancing act on your internal, customers, employees, on the security friction that you put in place.
Yep. Yep. The only other question I have open on this before I will end with a quote from Rich Mogul, but the only other question I have is any fines, any compliance things, any kind of regulatory pushes or kicks that'll come on the back of this? Or is this, as a team, we kind of shake our head like, nah, this is just another breach that's going to get moved across in a cycle or two of news and people are just going to move on?
It depends on the data. It depends on the data, and the data that becomes public that was stolen. If regulated data from one of these victims was stolen, becomes public, it could be a bad day for that victim.
I mean,
Understood. Okay. Well, oh, go ahead, Katie.
interestingly, I know a ton of people who are Live Nation Ticketmaster customers, right? We all do. It's a very
Mhm.
mainstream company. I haven't heard anybody say anything about receiving any notifications.
Nope.
So it seems to me like some of this, at least in the mainstream, is getting brushed under the rug, and so I agree that it's just it, Congress has their eyes on something bigger. Don't want to talk about how Congress works or doesn't work, but right now the sole focus is on AI and making news. It's almost like the media has infiltrated Congress and now they want a part of the AI hype. And so they're so hyper focused on that the mainstream boring stuff, and I know I harp on it. If you read anything I've written back to 2012, it's really, really boring. It talks about security hygiene. But it's the same thing in the fact that I haven't, and none of the people I know who are definitely Ticketmaster users haven't received anything, just kind of speaks volumes to where we are in the mainstream of cybersecurity.
So I'll end this storyline with a quote from Rich Mogul that Adrian put into our show notes here. He wrote a great piece on securosis.com about the cloud shared irresponsibilities model, as he calls it. And he finishes it with a great soundbite. I'll finish with a simple KPI that we can use to measure maturity across all platforms. The time or data volume before a cloud provider requires MSA on all administrative accounts. That's the KPI. That's the metric. How long is that stuff open? Is essentially how long is that risk available? And so I think it's a great quote. I think it's a good way to look at the issue at hand here with Snowflake.
Love Rich's stuff. Like Rich is a good person to read on cloud stuff in particular. He does a really good job.
So on to our next story of the day. I'm actually going to jump ahead of story here, Adrian, because I don't want to do two threat stories back to back. We're going to jump ahead of story. And the reason I'm making this jump is you mentioned about logs. You have a note in here you'd like to talk about the future of SIEM. I hate that term because I never know how to pronounce it.
SIEM.
We'll call it SIEM, the Security Information and Event Management System. Is it a real future? Is there a real future to the future of SIEM? Give us a little bit of background on what you were talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, there's people are going to call it different things. It's interesting seeing what it's evolving into. But it's something that's always promised a lot, not delivered a whole lot, unless you have a whole lot of people to throw at it. Traditionally, I rarely run into people with SIMs that are happy with it that don't have full time SIM developers. People are just building reports, parsers, just experts with data analysis, putting the time into that huge data store, making sure that you get value out of it. And it's just the nature of data, right? It's every new product that comes out. If you want to put it in your sim, that's another bit of labor to get it in there. Then you got to maintain it in there. Then one day the logs didn't show up, and you got to go investigate. Why are none of my endpoint logs coming in? Why are my firewall logs not coming in anymore? So it's just hugely labor heavy thing, but it's also the system of record for security investigations. So I guess you could call it something else, but we got to send that stuff somewhere. This is one of the big things that Microsoft got beat up over in the CSRB report is
Yep.
not having enough logs of their own stuff. They don't even know when the attacker got in that attack because their logs only went back 30 days. So I don't know if they were just using their own defaults that they use for customers and were a victim of their own.
They didn't pay the right license fee to themselves to get the
they didn't pay
more detailed logs
internally. They didn't pay the other cost center for premium logging. I guess I don't know, but
So
yeah.
Adrian, the question is SIEM, SOAR being reinvented into something new today? And obviously, you know where this is going to go with my thought process: security data lake, AI overlay, predictive SIL security. Right? Is that the future of SIEM? Is that where it's going? Right? Collecting not only event data, but marrying that event data with asset data, and then providing a predictive analytics or a predictive model on top of it that can actually, hopefully, stop threats ahead of them actually happening.
Well, so you've got a lot of use cases here, and you can instrument them in different ways. And in fact, I've heard a lot of people say, like, well, why didn't observability platforms become, essentially the SIM? Why don't they fulfill that function? Companies like New Relic, like they've got the same data. Like literally, we're asking for the same data from the same APIs. Why don't we just piggyback off of that? But we end up inventing it over and over again, and in large part because our use cases are different. The details we need out of those logs, how long we need those logs. We've got different regulations, different requirements, and yeah, I think that's the challenge of it. Is are you do you have it there for DFIR and you keep a certain amount for so long because maybe you find out about an incident that happened 3 months ago and you got to go investigate? Are you using like a SOAR tool or something like that, acting in real time on information as it comes in? Or do you have people proactively combing through it, threat hunting, looking for things? The whole compliance, regulatory, governance. Is my governance working correctly? Or things falling through the gaps? There's so many use cases here, and this is one of the reasons why it's tough to get value out of these things. Is they kind of have to build for all those different use cases, which is really tough to do with a product.
So Obviously, in my opinion, I think SIM, in the traditional sense of the word SIM, is dead. I don't believe it's extremely useful at this point for all the reasons you've outlined. But I think it's being reinvented by this concept of a security data lake, and pulling together event and state data to provide threat hunting analytics over time, to provide the breadth of the understanding of the environment. I think it's just a reinvention of the market and an innovation of the market that's occurring. I mean, you could call it SIM 3.0 if you really wanted to, right?
Anybody really cares what happens with the product. Like their processes aren't going to change. They
Mm.
still need to do the governance stuff. They still need to do the respond to incidents and look for threats and stuff.
Mhm.
Like all those processes don't change. Back in my day, it was all spinning disk and like RSA Envision was using a flat file.
RSA Envision. I remember
Yeah, it
that.
was using a flat file Sybase database, and it was not abnormal for a query to tell me it's going to take 8 hours to finish. So I would just go home, come back in the next day to look at my
Golly,
query
I couldn't
results.
imagine.
So we've come a long way from that. We can at least get queries back in a reasonable amount of time. We can have multiple people in there using the system, because the moment that second person came in and also did a query, doubled the amount of time it took my query to come back. This was pre big data, pre solid state,
Yeah.
uh, pre all that magic that I think we've kind of taken for granted. So we've at least solved some of these problems. These products have gotten, the technology behind the products have gotten better. I don't know if the products themselves have gotten better though.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and the whole market is a weird question. Katie, did you have any commentary you wanted to throw on this one?
No, I just spilled my tea all over my keyboard, so I was
Oh.
listening, but yeah, that's what I was doing. No,
I saw that look
actually,
on your face. I saw that look on your face, and I thought you actually had something to say. It was just a look of shock at
it
spilling on your
it was a
keyboard.
look of shock. It was spilling tea all over my keyboard. No, I mean, I think so. Adrian did make a comment while I was cleaning up about nobody cares what the products are, except when it comes to replace the products, right? It doesn't matter if the product is effective or not effective. If you have one person whose job
Yeah.
it is to sit there and tune those logs, to tune those rules in the SIM,
I have a
the
story
second
here.
you say, "Hey, we're going to replace this with something else," all hell breaks loose. So to that effect, yeah, it does matter what product it is, and I know
Yeah, Katie,
from.
ask me how we chose Envision.
How did you choose Envision, Adrian?
Out of the 4 different vendors we asked to do a proof of concept, this is back in a time when they would send an SE on site and they would set up on site because there was no cloud. It was the only one of the 4 vendors that in a week's time could get their product working.
Oh my God.
So yeah, the product does matter. You're right.
The product does
Yeah.
does matter a little bit, but I agree, we used to get all kinds of comments about, "Well, we have our SIM," when I was working at an asset management company. "We have our SIM, it does that." And it's like, "Really? How does it do that? How much time does it take?" So there's this legacy, like, eye rolling and groaning that's happening behind the scenes too, but, I don't think we're going to claw the SIM from. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, yeah, thanks, Tyler. I don't think we're
You're
going to
welcome.
claw the SIM from the IT and security team quite yet, but I agree it needs to evolve.
It's
So
almost
for those that
declawing it. It's declawing itself. And what I mean by that is, with all the activity in the SIM space, Splunk acquisition with Cisco, Exabeam, Logarithm, Palo Alto, and QRadar, people are, because this is bread and butter in my day job, is talking to customers about their security monitoring, EDR, their SIMs, and things like that. Most global 2000 companies that I talk to are trying to figure out what's next. And what's next for them is probably an 18 to 36 month journey, because these things are like, in the DNA of changing an airplane engine while the plane's in flight. So I think the demise of SIM as a product space will probably be quite long. But you've got the things like Cribble that are coming in, so you don't have to send everything to the SIM. My analogy on data is like my pictures on my phone. Do I ever delete pictures on my iCloud family plan? No, I just increase
never.
my data. And
Right.
customers are so upset with continuing to do that. They don't want to pay more. So things like Cribble are coming in. So at least you can target what's going into the SIEM. The data lakes are quite interesting. Data lakes don't do detection very well right now as well. So there's the detection component. I think data lakes do a better job today on like, here's my data. I'm going to do retrospective searches. I'm going to do hunting and things along those lines. I don't think we've seen as much change in activity in the SIEM space, probably from shortly after the, ArcSight getting acquired, Envision back in the day as well, QRadar getting acquired. I think we're in a really big spot, but if you are a big time of change, but if you're a global 2000 company, this is going to take, we have customers that will renew with their existing SIEMs because they don't have enough time to rip and replace a new SIEM. Meanwhile, they have all these other projects they need to do. They need to worry about their SaaS security. They need to worry about infrastructure as a service. So, I think SIEM is going to be on life support for a very long time until you have alternative solutions that have the use cases that the SIEM product has.
I don't think you can have 18 to 36 month projects and hope for them to be successful in the security space. Like,
well, what I mean on that, it's not so much
efficacy.
the migration.
He said nothing about
efficacy
there.
But you look at, and that total timeline could include, this is when our renewal is up. This is when EDR that's coming. It's like all the complexities, like there's the people and process components to it. Like people are like, okay, I just renewed for QRadar, for QRock. So the SaaS version of QRadar, right? They just renewed. Oh crap. Palo Alto bought it. They're going to kill that product and force me to go to SIEM. What do I need to do? So we need to start thinking there. So I would say it's like their total planning horizon and what they're going to evolve. It's not a bad time to wait, frankly, because the market is going to get, is going to have better solutions. Data lakes are going to do more. We're going to be able to do detection at various different sources and things along those lines. So when I talk to customers that are in this transition of, hey, we got to get rid of insert SIEM and insert reason you're leaving, it's getting end of life or someone acquired them, it's going to take them time to make that move. So I'm like, it's not bad. Give it another 12 months. The market will be more mature and maybe there'll be some other options. And XDR is, I'm doing the X symbol. XDR has come up as a potential, as a potential replacement for SIEM. I'm not ready to jump on that wagon, and we could perhaps do a whole nother conversation
it's
there as well.
Limited. Yeah. XDR is very focused on one or two use cases.
Most of my customers on XDR use it for ticketing and then like one or two plays. But there's transition there. So I guess the short of it for me is if you're looking to replace your SIEM, if you can give yourself like 12 months, the market's going to mature and there's going to be perhaps other options out there. And Tyler, you mentioned AI stuff. AI is coming to more in play along those lines. So
just lease them like a car, maybe, and get a new one every 3 years.
Well, isn't that exactly what the SaaS model would be anyways?
Right.
You're getting continuous upgrades for your
it's
normal
just hard.
$1
It's a lot harder to
fee.
replace. It's just a lot harder. You get rid of a car pretty easy. But again, these things are like changing the engine. Even if it's appliances that you own or if it's in the cloud, APIs make it a little bit easier, but there's things like I need to get my detection logic. I've got all my response plays, it's complicated. So I can keep going, but I won't.
Some of it you park it in the driveway and they're like, yeah, the engine's not ready yet. So it's just going to sit there on blocks. Like you'll own it for a couple of years before it actually starts becoming useful. So
yeah, we don't need to talk about dead cars and driveways. I have too many of those at the moment, and that's not the driveways that I have too many of. So with that being said, I'm going to move to our next topic, the Microsoft recall topic. This happened about a week or two ago, so we're halfway through this news cycle as well. And I think Adrian and I, for those of you that don't know, Adrian and I will come at this one probably from different angles. Maybe not. I can't wait to hear his take as we dive into it. But Microsoft recall is essentially the built-in dream that I've always had of tracking everything I do in my life in Windows, everything I click on, everything I view, everything I look at.
That is so true what you're saying right now.
Yeah, I want it all tracked. I want a second brain. I want to be able to query everything I do, right? And Microsoft Recall basically was the consumer promise of that on a Windows system. Anything you do on that Windows system is 100% tracked, managed, recallable, thus the name Microsoft Recall. And it was a massive disaster of a flop of a launch. It was absolutely horrendous. Cybersecurity teams jumped all over this thing, basically just completely ripping it apart for privacy issues, security issues. Yes, and I think we should definitely screenshot that pose that Rick just made there. But my question is, recall, Microsoft Recall, and I want to start with Katie's thoughts on this. Actually, is Microsoft Recall a bad product idea? Or was it just a bad marketing spin over the top of it? Meaning they didn't spin it right. They didn't provide, security options up front and didn't spin it the correct way from a marketing vantage point, thus making it just a flop. What's your take, Katie? What did you think about the Microsoft launch of Recall?
So we did talk about this on Enterprise Security Weekly last week. That was Thursday when we recorded this. And I've had some thoughts since then, which really doesn't speak well of my social life. But I've been thinking about this a lot because there are going to be some people, Tyler, like you, who are like, take everything, put it somewhere where I can immediately have access to it. I can query it. I can find what I need. I can have it arranged automatically. I can use it. And then there's going to be the other people who are like, hell no. Nope, let's not do that. So it depends on who you are, the decision of whether it's a bad product or not. So that's one thing. The second thing is, from a marketing standpoint, we've got two very, very different companies, because we were talking about Apple last week and like the Google or the Apple glasses that they're launching with the what are those glasses,
Vision
Adrian?
Pro.
You just got them, right?
Yeah,
Or there
Meta
was an
Glasses
ad.
Vision Pro.
Yeah, something like that. And it again, it's like taking everything and putting it all in one place. Apple manages these unbelievable B2C campaigns. They put these spins on them that make people feel good. Microsoft is not quite as good. Now, their security, depending on who you are, may be seen as deficient in certain areas. They are one of the biggest security companies in the world that doesn't do security as well as some, minor little startups that you might not know their name. So the efficacy of the security may or may not be important. But here's the thing that changed for me when I was thinking about the whole marketing spin, because I do think that marketing is really, really important, and how you position it and the words you put into it. The reason I bring up, Microsoft maybe not the best security company is because they are in a way trying to become this massive security player, but they never quite get the messaging right. Whereas if you look at a company like Apple with those glasses, which have the internet connected, and you can look at a thing and go, hey, what is that? What's the history? Where does that come from? Apple always manages to have these very user-friendly, feel-good campaigns. If you look at the history of advertising and marketing over decades, all the best campaigns hit you in the feels. They make you feel good. They make you feel welcome. They make you feel like you can be accepted. I mean, really, Nike, just do it. What's the smile? Have a Coke and a smile. Like, all of these really iconic marketing campaigns make you feel good. Microsoft marketed
So
Recall as an organizational tool. Here's the problem. Here's what I've been thinking about. Wow, I'm verbose. Here's what I've been thinking about for the last few days. Microsoft is also the company that, up until fairly recently, ran everybody, who worked in an office-related business, ran your life from a work point of view, right? Very intricately tied to everything you do on the work front. The separation of personal and work has gone away. It's bled into everything we do.
is that a bad thing? Is that a bad thing? At the end of the day, I see where you're going with this. Where you're going with this, from what I can tell, is that you're saying that with the right marketing spin and as an Apple product, this might have been perfectly great launch, even with the security flaws that existed because they just didn't market it right. Is that the TLDR?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm awfully verbose, but the association with Microsoft Office, or M365 now, leaves a bit of a sting in people's minds, and they didn't do anything to make it better. Have a Coke and a smile. That wasn't there.
So they didn't market it for shit. They didn't do a good job of making the feels right.
When you're talking about organizing somebody's life, their thoughts, their notes, their history, you got to make them feel pretty good, even if it's about business, because there's still the ooh creepies that come along with that for a lot of people.
All right. I'm going to go to Adrian now. Adrian, would you put recall on your system?
When I originally heard about it, I got excited, and then when they said it's just continually taking screenshots, I was a bit confused. I thought they were going to go in a different direction with it. And I think there's certainly the space in the market for this, and we've seen a lot of third-party apps that aim to be that second brain and help you remember where you did stuff. All the time with me, I'll be taking a call on this computer, my podcast computer, because it has a nice AV setup. It's got 2 big monitors, and I'll go to pull something up, and I'll realize I did it on my laptop. I mean, we've had Dropbox since like 2006, 2008 or something like that, but it just thrashes my machine every time it goes to sync files, even today. So, 3 or 4 years ago, I just stopped putting that sync software on my machines. But it would still be great to be able to pull that stuff up regardless of what machine I'm on, open it in a web browser tab or something like that. Like, just finding the file is an unsolved problem. I don't think we need to jump to the contents of what was on the web page, just that I visited the web page. So I think they went too far. There's already an unsolved piece that's just, what was the name of the website that I visited? What was the name of that file I was working on that was, about this? Like, we're still at the file name and metadata stages, or website and, context of the website stages. Like, what was that website I was looking at while I was in this meeting? I think you could knock it out of the park with just that. I think they went too far, and we didn't need constant screenshots, because I mean, you don't have to think that much to think, oh man, there could be some disastrous edge cases here. And like, there was a Mac product, that was pretty popular, that just recorded audio all the time. Just in case you wanted to go back and hear something, and would transcribe what's happening all the time, like when you're not in a meeting. Like, just disastrous edge cases there, and issues that can happen with that kind of thing. But I think there was a happy middle place, and they missed it.
Yeah, and I think you did a bunch of research too in our show notes here about some competing products, and that this isn't the first product that actually does this type of activity, right? You have Vortimo Unravel, you have Rescue
Yep.
Time, you have Wind Recorder, you have Rewind.ai, which I actually did try on my personal Mac. And it just didn't work for shit. But the vision, the idea was right for me. It just didn't actually execute well. But this isn't the first product that attempted to do this. So to Katie's point, none of those got backlash. So maybe this literally is just a marketing problem with a couple of security things that need to be upgraded. Like, let's be clear here. They need to make sure that that they had the database being encrypted properly, that they had proper enrollment techniques, that it wasn't on by default, right? All of these things were mistakes for sure. But if those mistakes weren't done, I still think we would have had a privacy wonk hit on it, just because it's Microsoft, right? And if it had been Mac, I don't think we would have.
Yeah, if Apple, starts a VPN service and offers you the app, or if Comcast does the same, which one are you more likely to trust and to jump at? So yeah, the brand matters. And the current state of the brand absolutely matters.
Yep. What about you, Rick? Would you ever install this on your system, or is there absolutely no way that your privacy-minded world would accept this?
I wouldn't line up to be an early adopter. The one thing I think about this in particular, but more broadly speaking, is when Gmail first came out, all the privacy people were like, oh my God, what are we giving Google all of our access? We should be running our own mail servers, etc. And I don't think it took very long, but now SaaS email is commonplace. Enterprises, have been, Office 365 for quite some time. So I can't help but to predict that, in an AI future, everything's going to be recorded. And in fact, you could go, I mean, you could do read some of the articles about some of the stuff that's going on in China right now. Like a lot of this stuff is happening, and with your social scoring and stuff along those lines. So, fast forward 5 years from now, this type of capability is probably pretty common. And I also think you said privacy wonks, and it made me think, like, who are the people that were most, in uproar here? Cybersecurity people, privacy wonks. But what about just like the general consumer that's out there that's looking to make their life a little bit easier, and maybe there's some practical applications for it? I'm still not signing up for it, not at this stage. But I've actually seen how you use some of the AI stuff that you use, Tyler, and I can see how it does make you more efficient. And also,
That's right.
I mean, to be fair, at your age and brain, like, you do need a co-pilot to help you out.
Okay.
So there's a real application for you.
I almost did a
Okay.
spit take there.
Okay. All right.
And we could create a Tyler focused old guy,
A Tyler
Sweet.
bot.
Okay.
a Tyler sync, and we could definitely play on words there. I mean, some sort
Okay.
of
Let's.
It probably won't work
rein
that
this
well,
in.
though. It'll probably, like,
it'll repeat
glitch
itself ad
and
nauseum.
All right, let's rein this in and move on to our next topic. I'm going to throw it to Katie. We're gonna give you about 10 minutes on this one, Katie. You just got a new job. Can you update us on what's going on with you on the job front? And then in particular, you wrote a really interesting piece that actually I think touched a nerve with some of the Cyber Y readers, entitled "Finding a Cyber Job Without a Network. Is it possible?" Give us a little bit of information about the journey you went through on that job hunt.
Yeah, so I got a new job. I am now working with Ox Security. Super happy to be there.
that's
Very
awesome.
new. There's a million and two different things I still have to learn. So I'm still onboarding. I've only been there about 2 or so weeks, 3 weeks maybe. And my process of getting a job was, I think, pretty typical for a lot of people. Although my cycle was really shortened. I'm not going to give away the punchline from the article. You can go read it on the Cyber Y. Um, it wasn't hugely painful. Um, and that's due very, very much in part to the network I've built over my years in the cybersecurity industry. Now, I haven't been in cybersecurity for as long as I've been working, but I've been very lucky to have met some amazing people who, for some reason, will help me out. And when I say, hey, I'm looking for a job, or hey, I need help with this or that, there are a certain number of people who will always respond, always try to help when they can. And it sort of fast tracked my search. And I found a new job pretty quickly with a company I really, really wanted to talk to. But the key was who I know. Now, I've been at companies where I've been in a position to hire people. A company that frequently hires experts to answer questions for enterprise organizations. So people wanted to know me then, because they wanted to be those experts who are in front of
Yep.
enterprises, and they wanted to get paid. I've been at a couple of companies where I ran the content for conferences. People wanted to know me. They wanted to be my friend because they wanted to showcase their research, their finding, their skills, their presentation, their writing at the conferences. And there were times in my career where I was getting like gifts from people because they were so thankful that they were invited to speak at conferences. Now, from my experience, some of that did start to fade away when I joined vendor companies. When I joined vendor companies and didn't have the ability to hire people or to give people a platform. It's natural. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily take it personally, but because I was in these positions for a long time, I happen to know a good number of people, and it's been a good experience. And like I said, I've met some wonderful people. So I wrote this
So
article, and the spin for me is super positive, but the underlying message on my article was that I got fast tracked through a lot of companies' hiring processes because of my network. And I think that's problematic because there are people in this industry, in any industry, I'm sure, that are sort of heads down, do their work. They're not social. They don't want to be social. They do want that
Sure.
separation of work and personal life. They're, whatever their situation, it's not right, it's not wrong. They just don't have a huge network. And those people struggle. I've seen it among a lot of people I know, whether again it's personal or work colleagues. And so I put this article out about my experience and how, again, I'm super lucky, super grateful for everything I have and I've been given. But the other side, the flip side, is people who don't have it are going to struggle. And I can tell you that the minute it was published, my LinkedIn message box lit up with people saying, oh yeah, this hit me where it hurts. I spoke to one person who was a speaker at one of the series of the events when I was at an events company, who was a major privacy guy and has worked for major companies, who's been out of work for a long time because he's kind of heads down, kind of shy, and he can't get good interviews. And it's absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah,
And it needs to be a meritocracy. It can't be a who's who of the quote cyber elite. It has to be, do you do good work? Somebody said to me during this hiring well, these positions are too important. I have to go off of who I know and who's trusted. Well, my major issue with this is different situations breed different personalities, different reactions, different interactions, different chemistry between teams. Somebody who is great at one company might not be great at another company. And so we have to be careful, and we have to be a little more open-minded about the hiring process, especially given the state of the market and the demand.
So let me ask you this question, because I'm not going to ask the original question I was going to ask the entire group here, because I'm pretty confident none of us have probably found jobs randomly without a reference or without knowing, because we all have bigger personas and we're all out there frequently, right? We're not that introverted, shy, heads down doer that you're describing. What is the solution though? Because I you hear all these recommendations of, hey, maintaining your personal network, growing your personal network is very important to the career, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the solution other than to tell people who have that issue that they have to do something a little differently? Is there another solution we can do? Should we tell hiring managers to, hey, give everybody a fair shake regardless of their references and who they come through? Like, what is the real fix there?
So, yeah, I mean, I think there's the argument from HR, hiring managers, recruiters is going to be, well, I can't go through all of these resumes. I just scan resumes and the right buzzwords come up. I think you need to put a little more time and effort into it. I understand it's hard. I understand it's time consuming, but if we want to get good candidates, I think there needs to be a little more thought put into it until that AI starts to get actually better and isn't just looking for, the 5 buzzwords you've put in to look for. We have to get better. We have to take some chances. It is literally your job description in the hiring process, if you are part of the hiring team or the interview team, to suss out good people. The answer, oh, I can only take people who I know who are trusted by someone else, is not the right answer. The right answer is get better at your interviewing skills. The answer is get better at your own communication skills and try to find people who are a good fit for the position, not somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that you might know and might have met once in, 2018 at RSA.
Yep. Okay, I am going to jump to our next topic because we're already running out of time, and I have 2 topics plus a story number 5 left to cover for the show. So, Rick, I'm going to throw it back to you. There's been some news over this past weekend about scattered spider arrests. In particular, some asshole goes by the name of Tyler has gotten arrested.
Yeah, that's what
Tyler
attracted me
S?
to this article.
I'm pretty sure it was
Tyler
No, it was
S.
not.
Tyler S. is the mastermind behind Scattered Spider.
Nope. Good try. It was Tyler B., but arrested in Spain for allegedly leading the cybercrime group Scattered Spider. What do we know about this story so far, Rick?
Well, this is a Scottish citizen that was traveling, and a lot of times the cyber criminals get caught when they're traveling. In fact, that's why a lot of the Russian criminals don't leave Russia or don't travel to places that have extradition treaties with the West. But basically, Scattered Spider is a little unique in the ransomware scene because they're a collective of a lot of English language speakers. They actually had partnered with some Russian groups at one point as well. So Scatter Spider, MGM over the summer, they've been in the news. They were actually disrupted by law enforcement earlier this year. I have a slide I put in all my presentations. Maybe I'll add it to the Cyber Why this week. What Jeff Goldblum saying, cybercrime finds a way. Like, it's great that we got this arrest of this person. Or if you're a Marvel MCU fan, it could be Hydra. It could be the joke there. That you could have. Like, it's great that law enforcement is doing disruptions, and law enforcement's actually done quite a few disruptions of late over the past couple of years. But it's kind of a drop in the bucket, so to speak. Like, there's going to be somebody else waiting in the wings. I do welcome these types of things. Let's take a bad actor off the playing field. But Scattered Spider in particular is a large collective, geographically dispersed. Actually, Lapsus is another threat group that was similar to this, that had English language and Portuguese speakers there. But the hit list for Scattered Spider's been, quite big. Twilio, LastPass, DoorDash, MailChimp. In the mix there. So it's good to see these law enforcement actions. What's unique here is they have them in custody, contrasted with, again, the Russian actors who were very likely never have in custody.
Yeah, this one's a big one, right? It's it's funny. It's a big one, but also I don't think it's going to freaking matter because every time it seems like once a month we're talking about the latest snabs or the latest group getting busted or the latest exit scam, and then there's just another one. The next month we're talking about some Scottish guy versus some Russian guy, and at the end of the day, is this going to have any impact? Right? The Hydra head gets cut off, as you say.
Crime hasn't been solved in other fields, so why should we be special?
Quote of the day right there, folks. Quote of the day. Okay. So what's the big tip here? If you're a cyber criminal, don't leave your home country where you have safety.
Yeah, don't travel. Or how about don't be a criminal? But apparently crime does pay, unfortunately.
Well, he was traveling. He was on the run, right? Like, that's what I got out of what I read, that like they were beating him up or something. He left the UK because they were threatening his mom and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, that does happen between
him up?
Like rival SIM swappers.
Yeah. So he's in SIM swapping. I mentioned earlier the SMS based MFA being a failure. Like, this is a group and this individual that was highly proficient at doing that to get the code that they could then use to bypass. So kind of like I don't know if it's a similar analogy, perhaps like how the gamers will SWAT each other and rival people that they're gaming. It's kind of a similar kind of rivalry amongst the groups here. Now, in Russia, things can end up quite differently, and you have seen some of the cyber criminals, end up dead. But I suspect that might be because they're not going to partner with Russian, or they did something to upset Russian intelligence services that are out there. But for defenders, I mean, keep doing the things that you're doing. Protect your perimeter, patch your systems, have logging. Who the law enforcement arrest isn't going to impact the day-to-day life of criminals. What's more impactful is when, like, the FBI releases decryption keys for ransomware, that could have more impact on a company that's out there. Or if FBI has it, you get ransomed and then they can decrypt it for you. But the arrests, yay, I applaud international law enforcement efforts, but it's not going to make a big difference.
All right. So that's all we have, I think, for bad actor news today. Thank you, Rick, for catching us up on those things. There's one more serious story I do want to bring up, and this one's a touchy subject. It's a spicy take that we've entitled the Gili Ra'anan Model. Gili Ra'anan is he is the founder of CyberStarts, which is an investing firm with amazing stats, right? And some would say all too amazing. I'll get to the stats in a second. So Ra'anan is 54. He's an ex-Israeli 8200 unit. He's supposedly well known for inventing CAPTCHA. founder and sold Sanctum Security, which for those of us that are old heads will remember Sanctum Security. And
He's the son of a bitch that makes us have to put in captures.
okay, so that's not something he wants to be known for, but apparently he is. And N Layers, he joined Sequoia as an investor in 2009, leading investments in Adalom and Armis. And most recently, he is the founder of CyberStarts, which is a cybersecurity investment fund. That fund in particular runs a program called Sunrise, where Sunrise is a unique approach to venture capital that has gained attention and raised some concerns for conflict of interest. And this story broke this week, where essentially an author on Calculist, I think is the Calculist Tech, basically called out Gili Ra'anan for abusing conflicts of interest, basically creating CISO environments and CISO support advisory groups that were funded with equity in the fund to advise the cybersecurity startups within CyberStarts. And in some cases, allegedly, again, just going on what was in the article, allegedly paying some of these CISOs to purchase product, regardless of the efficacy of the product and whether that product was needed, because by doing so, it would raise the capabilities and the financial situation of the startups that were funded by CyberStarts, and essentially returning money back to the CISO in the form of carry in the fund. So this has been one of those little known kind of issues that has been percolating for years, and finally someone called out publicly. So one thing I didn't know about CyberStarts is their stats. They're quite amazing, as my notes say here, a bit too amazing in some places, right? CyberStarts is 6 years old, has 3 funds, and all 3 funds have an internal rate of return, an IRR, over 100%. That is incredible returns for a venture capital fund. CyberStarts is among the top 5 of all VC funds in the world when it comes to returns, with 22 companies with a combined value of $35 billion, including 5 unicorns. These are unheard of hit rates. Like, these hit rates are absolutely insane. And so this is an interesting situation where these CISOs are potentially getting themselves into a pretty serious conflict of interest. Again, allegedly, I'm just going on by what's in the article. The Gili Ra'anan model, aka Sunrise, may be throwing a little bit of shade on some CISOs that are in a little bit of hot water now. Rick, as a CISO and a former practitioner CISO over time, do you have any comments that you want to make around this issue?
Well, there's a couple thoughts that I have. One macro one is I always get kind of annoyed when I see people promote things in events or social media where I know they're an investor, and this could be like angel investor. It doesn't have to be a CISO, and they
Sure.
don't make their positions known. So I've always kind of been annoyed by it. I will say, I don't know if you would call this a dirty little secret, but this has been widely discussed behind closed doors. And just putting the contrarian head on, like you know, there could be jealousy that's in the mix here. I mean, the numbers are astounding, as you just said, for sure, that's out there. I would be, when you join a company and you sign all your paperwork, and certainly for the type of CISOs that are involved in CyberStarts, they're typically Fortune 500 type of CISOs. There's kind of a, CISOs partnering with VC funds is it's not uncommon. There'll be a CISO advisory board, and ultimately they are trying to work the network of the CISOs. They're also trying to get the CISO's perspective on, hey, you're in the trenches, what works, what doesn't work. These startups are trying to get product market fit. All of us kind of have various takes and experience in trying to find that. I think where it crosses the line is when you're taking money and taking, commissions or the things that are
Sure.
alleged here. Like, I wonder how many CISOs are worried about their jobs if in fact, this example is true. But I do know these types of things happen. If there's going to be some oversight there, and someone in a CISO group that I'm in on last Friday, when this came out, someone's like, I bet there's going to be a lot of openings for Fortune 500 CISOs coming up pretty soon.
Oof. That's a
Said
pretty
from a very senior type of CISO person.
The article
Yeah, you
hints
know,
that's already happening.
yeah, so it's interesting because it's not just we titled this the Gili Ra'anan model per the article that we took it from. This is not the only place that this happens, right? CISOs across the board, many of them are investors in funds where their return on that investment is pertinent to the funds investing in cyber companies that they are then buying. Now, I have had the experience in a previous startup where I brought in angels that were CISOs. And the majority, if not all of them that I remember, recused themselves from the purchasing process. They said, "Hey, I can't purchase this. I'm an investor in this. I'm an angel, or I'm an advisor to that company. Rest of my security team makes this call. Procurement team makes this call. I'm not involved." But even that has a bit of an issue when the CISO of a Fortune 500 company turns to his underling and says, "Hey, you need to look at this
Right.
company, at least include them in the mix," because there's an implicit kind of recommendation that comes there. So back when I was an analyst, you couldn't have investments in companies you covered as an analyst for this exact reason. So should
Right.
we go forward? Should CISOs not be allowed to have investments in cyber companies where they control it? What I mean by that is if they're in a mutual fund that's distributed, okay, that's one thing, right? That they have no control over their equity position. Um, but there's clear conflict of interest across the board in what's happening in cybersecurity in every fund, not just cyberstars.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff in the startup space is not um, foundational stuff, right? It's stuff for new tech. Rick, you mentioned SaaS security earlier. I don't know. Depends on the company. If you're a SaaS first company, maybe that's foundational for you. But I've got a good friend who works for a company that was mentioned in this article as having, a CISO that participated in this, and he had no clue. I sent it to him, and he was like, "I always wondered why we were spending all this money in these weird companies, like all this stuff that we didn't need."
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many crazy things in this investigative journalism piece, right? The article, the article Calculus saw an Excel file with over 82 CISOs, the score of each CISO, the percentage of their holding in the fund, and the cumulative payouts that they each received as a result of liquidation events in the fund.
Oh, and how you
If
get
you
points
then
is
map
interesting.
that back to if you map that back to the purchases that that company did of products in that fund, I mean, there's smoking guns everywhere all over this thing.
Yeah, and the way you earn points, like taking a meeting, you can earn points. If you like talk in the company's behalf, you get points. If you answer emails from the people at the startup, you get points. So basically, they're paying the CISO for their time through this kind of uh, you know loyalty points system. Call it what you will. They're paying the CISO directly for
Yep.
services.
This is
Yeah,
like
it's
go ahead, Tyler.
it's very direct. That's the thing, right? Like even I think even the direct payment is really bad. But if you even take it off of the direct payment and just say that there's conflicts of interest, this goes well beyond cyberstars. Rick, go ahead.
Well, this is also like a side hustle for CISOs, right? Part of the retirement strategy is I want to be an advisor. Now, there's probably a difference if you're an advisor for a specific company, giving them, I wouldn't want to paint a brush to say every CISO that's doing advisory work from a startup is getting compensated or, there's a conflict of interest. I don't want to paint that broad of a brush, but this is certainly an additional revenue stream for CISOs, and in particular the Fortune 500 CISOs, global 2000 CISOs that are looking to move on and retire, and that's what they want to do, right? I'm going to advise startups, I'm going to be a
Yeah.
talking head, I'm going to do that sort of stuff because everyone knows the CISO job is so stressful, and especially in SEC land here in the United States. So yeah, this could potentially eliminate a significant revenue stream for a lot of CISOs out there, and maybe their main job revenue stream if that conflict of interest becomes apparent to their employer.
Yeah, this is the mafias, right? You got the Israeli mafia, you got, and I'm not going to name any more because there are a lot of them. But you could probably, if somebody really wanted to dig in from a investigative journalism standpoint, identify 4, 5, 6 different separate mafias that counter this. So I'm going to end this discussion with a couple of different quotes from Reddit, our cybersecurity group. There's just a straight up commentary here that says cyber starts exposed. On Twitter or X from Haroon Mir, a good friend of ours, he says, this story is kind of wild. I think a real danger with cybersec companies using growth hacks is that they hit scale without a product that actually helps. This leads to terrible outcomes for everyone, except I guess if the goal is just the exit. Bryson Bort says, this is flat out unethical. A CISO has a fiduciary responsibility to their company, and this is a conflict of interest. And then Priyadarshi Prasad said, we're not a part of this or any group like this. If you find our solution compelling, if we can help you address complex data security and privacy challenges, we are here for you. That's your only reward of working with us. So super producer Sean will pop these up on the screen there while we're talking about them. Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, there's direct conflict of interest things here that have to be exposed. So it's going to be, I think this is going to have a long-term fallout.
I think there's going to be more exposure. What I've heard in several of the Slack communities or text-based communities I'm in is that some American news outlets are doing their investigations on this as well. So I think you're right.
And
there's
UK.
going to be a longer tail.
Yep. And UK Adrian also said, yeah. Yep. This one's only just beginning, folks. This one's only just beginning. So with that, we're going to go to our story number 5, our fun story of the day. And we've mentioned this before. Today's folks working 2, 3, 4 full-time jobs simultaneously and using automated mouse movers, aka jigglers, to make sure that their mice are moving and seem like they're working all day long. So I actually have an article here where Wells Fargo has fired over a dozen folks for simulation of keyboard activity. Now, Adrian broke this news. I think you broke this on ESW, and I stole it, but I do have some value to add to this story, Adrian.
Okay.
So several Wells Fargo employees were fired for simulating keyboard activity, possibly to deceive their employer about their network presence. The bank confirmed the termination of the workers using tools like a mouse mover or mouse jiggler. And it turns out that the dismissed employees were all from Wells Fargo's investment and wealth management divisions, which is kind of funny. But what I would like to bring up, and we'll have super producer Sean bring it up on the big screen, is my favorite mouse jiggler, because I was doing some Googling to try to find some that made sense, is this mouse jiggler right here. So for those of you that aren't watching this on video, please switch over to YouTube and check this out. It is the coolest laptop touchpad jiggler. It doesn't work on Dell. It says specifically does not work on Dell, but it keeps your active laptop trackpad moving. It's undetectable. It's a cordless mouse jiggler with mechanical movement. So yeah, I think I might have to order one of these for my 3 to 4 extra jobs that I run. What do you think, Adrian? Should you get a mouse jiggler?
Apparently they're onto it. Yeah, I don't know if the funny thing is it's not a piece of software. And people watching the video will see this. I found another one that's basically just looks like a USB dongle for a mouse or something like that. And it's because you do have MDM, EMM software that is one of the features, detects if somebody's actually using the computer. Which honestly, I don't think that's great either.
That's awfully clunky.
Spying on your employees like that. Like, look at their work output, right? That is such a weird looking gadget.
I know. You have to watch this live, folks.
Wrong.
You have to come in and get on YouTube and take a look at the video or get on the video podcast here. It actually is a finger. It is a item that looks like a finger.
A mint green one.
A mint green finger that jiggles your trackpad.
Also, I have a slogan for that company.
And an extended finger.
It does look like an extended finger. What's your slogan, Katie?
Dude, don't get a Dell.
Yeah, you can't use a jiggler with a Dell, apparently. So okay.
So
Go
yeah,
ahead,
we've heard of people doing this, and this is just the latest iteration of this. There have been stories in the past of somebody getting like 5 or 6. I think the last one I heard of was 6 network admin jobs. And what they would do is they wouldn't pretend to do the job. They would outsource it. They would offshore. Yeah, they would offshore the job, and this is many years ago. So they would set up a webcam. This is in the age of hardware RSA keys. I know some people are still using those things, but this is when they were prevalent. And they would set up a webcam in front of these so that these offshored workers that were doing their 5 or 6 jobs for them for a tiny fraction of what they were getting paid could see the 6-digit numbers so that they could log into things. So yeah, the technology has changed, but the still people trying to stack their jobs and get multiple salaries at once. And I think my favorite. I was looking at some conversation on this on Reddit, and one of the top comments on one of the postings of this story was so the title says Wells Fargo fires over a dozen for simulation of keyboard activity. And then the top comment says, I fired Wells Fargo over simulation of ethical banking and business practices.
All right, we're going to end on that note. Adrian, thank you very much for your commentary on mouse jigglers. Rick, way to keep up with the latest and greatest busts in the cyber world. And Katie, thank you so much on your journey, and congratulations on getting your new role. With that, thank you to our weekly lead sponsor, Material Security. Go check them out at material.security. Thank you to our super production team, Dead Inside Media, and thank you, Sean. Contact myself or directly to Sean if you have a request for any kind of podcast work, editing, graphic design work. Sean's a rock star at Dead Inside Media. And yeah, thanks, guys. Give it a wave, and we'll call it a day. Thank you, guys.